Greetings and salutations, viewers and listeners. Welcome to episode 112 of Word Ninjas Live. It's the fan service episode, but not in the way you think. I am your host, Charles, and joining me tonight are Peoples. Peoples who are now delayed and not going to introduce themselves, so keep going down the line.
I am not going to be taking off my shirt during this episode. I am Justin Isaacs.
And I'm Calvin Williams. Hi there.
And the other one who is pretending to be a robot is Will. And I'm actually going to hand it right over to Justin because, hey, he's in charge for tonight.
Because it's my turn. Yes, we will be talking about fan service. What the definition is, what its place in current media is, some things to look out for, how to use it appropriately. We will be talking about some not safe for work content, and the show notes contains links to some not safe for work content, as well as spoilers. The spoilers are well marked. Assume that anything involving Metal Gear Solid is also not safe for work. CJ, if you remind me after, I will also mark all these not safe for work because there are a lot of them. The Bayonetta stuff is not safe for work. The Metal Gear Solid 5 stuff is not safe for work. And obviously, if you do creative Google searching on some of these topics, it will be not safe for work. But on the video stream, we will not be showing any of it, so you should be safe to listen to and watch at your leisure. All right, so the first question that we have to answer is, what is fan service? And if you go through the show notes, I've linked both the Wikipedia article on fan service and the TV Tropes article on fan service. Obviously, the standard TV Tropes warning applies. Don't fall into that rabbit hole because there's a lot of fun stuff on that site. I have sort of distilled the definition down to a tactic in which a media company uses gratuitous action, violence, or sexuality for the service of the fans of the media with the purpose to draw them in and keep them consuming content, which in turn bumps up the ratings and sales of the media. So this does not only apply to anime, this also applies to books, photography, paintings, other media, although movies and TV is obviously a big hitter on that. The big word in the definition is gratuitous. And the next thing we have to do is sort of define gratuitous. Unfortunately, the definition is subjective at best. I sort of distill it down to if it rarely serves the plot or any character development. It's usually not subtle. There's happy accidents that result in exposing underwear or nudity. There's the accidental male-male kissing, which is pretty common now. Unrealistic proportions or camera angles only during the fan service scene. I don't necessarily have a problem with specific art styles, but when the art style radically changes to support some sort of gratuity just for that fan service scene, it comes out a little obvious what they're doing. Also, absurd situations and hyper unnecessary violence, which my example here is the Mortal Kombat fatalities, if you're familiar with those. They're extremely gratuitously violent, and they get more and more violent every year, and they bring up the violence because, number one, they sort of have a history of the gratuitous violence already, and to keep bringing people in, they have to get kind of more and more intense. And so far, they have delivered year after year. I hesitate to see what they're going to do for the next Mortal Kombat franchise. They might have hit their peak. One thing that a lot of people will instantly jump on for when talking about fan service is talking about females being the subject of fan service to males. So is fan service exclusively female? And I would say absolutely not. It occasionally is more prevalent in manga and anime, but there's a lot of media in which sort of what they call a beefcake, which is a muscled male figure that's predominantly used to attract the female audience or an otherwise male-centered demographic. I chose the Avengers as a good example. It's easy to jump at like Black Widow and say, "Oh, this is obviously fan service. Look at what she's wearing. She's wearing basically a giant latex suit that's all shiny." But you have to also consider all of the male protagonists that are designed both to fulfill the male power fantasy, but also subsequently bring in a female audience to a franchise which the females are underrepresented as a group of people that watches the content. And manga and anime is no exception, and there's lots of fan service aimed at even young girls. And you can think about this also as like the romance novels you could consider fan servicey as well. Before I move on to specific examples and what our general opinion of fan service is, or how we feel fan service is represented, wanted to go through the rest of the group and see if anyone had any comments or ideas on what they felt fan service was, and if my definitions basically fared well. I was extremely inspired by this topic, obviously, and did a lot of research and basically wrote a paper on it. So I think I've covered most everything, but wanted to see if CJ, if he had anything to add before we move on to specific examples. And
No, as far as definitions and explanations, I think you covered it pretty well. The only things that come to mind would be examples that I've seen and experienced in regards to fan service, but I'll wait until that part.
Sure, and I suspect that that's the same for the other two people. The definition is generally. Anyone else have any specific comments on it?
You pretty much hit it on the nose for me. So I just have like possible examples, or like examples that I want to bring up to the group to see if they would consider it fan service.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely be going over that very shortly.
Okay.
So one question that I kind of want to bring up as a topic point, which I'll keep as sort of an open discussion for all of us, is fan service bad or inappropriate? And I think this is this will roll into sort of our examples. I have a few examples here that sort of highlight, fan service isn't necessarily bad and it's not necessarily inappropriate. I didn't get too specific on this because I kind of wanted it to be sort of an open discussion, but some small topics that I thought about is objectifying versus sexualizing versus empowering. This is a very muddy area, especially when it comes to female characters in media. There's a lot of argument about whether or not certain characters are, empowered with their sexuality, or if that's a cop-out. There's also, fan service can be a form of lighthearted comedy, ironically being over the top or being sort of meta in that sense, sort of breaking the fourth wall and kind of being fan servicey for the sake of being obviously fan servicey and sort of doing commentary on that. Action adrenaline, big explosions, Michael Bay stuff, that's not necessarily bad. That's sort of what drives action movies. And I enjoy consuming action movies, and I enjoy consuming a lot of things that can be generally considered fan servicey. Also, keep in mind that a lot of the fan service stuff has age restriction on it. While maybe some of the manga and anime totes the line a little bit on that, most things that would be considered fan servicey, like the aforementioned Mortal Kombat fatalities, this is all rated M stuff, and at least in the U.S. we have an 18+ rule basically on that. So you could think of it as sort of being inappropriate, but adults consuming the content should be given a little more leeway than children and teenagers viewing the content as well. And there's arguments on that end as well. Also, it's important to think about freedom of expression. Artists are going to have certain art styles, and they're going to draw with certain proportions. Writers have different writing styles, and some people cater to a mass audience, and the mass audience expects something. And if they're expected to generate revenue, they need to sort of appeal to their audience. So it's sort of an audience-driven phenomenon, and not necessarily a first-hand artist-driven phenomenon. And always something that I think we all support, especially based on the conversation last week, is that you shouldn't consume media that you do not want to be a part of. If you're not a fan of a certain type of fan service, then don't consume that media. Don't purchase that book, and let it happen the way it happens. There's obviously some rare cases where something might be a little much, and that can be a separate discussion. But for the most part, I think we should leave violent video games alone. They're rated M for a reason. I'm not going to get into the whole politics around it, but just as an artist myself, and sort of how I feel media needs to be represented and be free, I'm fine with a lot of it. And so we have a lot of examples here between the 3 or 4 of us, depending on how good Will's connection ends up being. So that I don't talk too long, I'll break it up and people can give their examples before I jump into my examples. Before I do that, there's other types of fan service that are not necessarily, part of the definition that I described before, and I sort of have a little list here in the show notes. Intertextual references and direct crossovers. If your favorite character from one media goes to another show, or there's spin-offs, or there's a good example where in the show Archer himself ends up in the Bob's Burgers restaurant, which is funny because he does the voice of both characters. So that's always good, and that would be considered fan service under a broader definition. Relationships, especially in TV shows that drag on and on and on, is sort of like a, we really want these two people together. So to keep people coming in, they'll make the relationship just a little bit set, and then sort of never really finish it off and get them into an actual relationship for the audience. So it gets dragged on. And that is specifically designed to keep people watching so that they can, see how the relationship develops, and, they know that they're going to get together at the end. They just have to see it for themselves. Absurdity and silliness could be considered fan service if it is sort of done in a tongue-in-cheek way, and sort of, the horror movie genre falls into this a little bit. There's silly amounts of violence that don't really make sense. One thing that I read an article on were covers at concerts. So if you're going to see a band and they do a cover of another band, that could be considered fan service with a broad definition. Another thing that I was thinking about were the massive unwieldy weapons and the pauldrons in MMOs. And every time there's a new patch, they have to get bigger and better, and sort of that rush to get gear that is ridiculous looking and kind of drives the item loot grind for a lot of MMOs. And then I happen to have watched a few scenes from the Matrix trilogy, and I thought Bullet Time was a pretty decent fan service tidbit. So yeah, before I go into my specific examples, let's go around and talk about everyone else's examples and see if we can come up with more things that would be considered fan service. CJ, I think you had some on your list, and as well as Calvin, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I did my best to keep my list short because basically every series that I watch or consume has some form of fan service in it at some point. The biggest ones that I would probably bring up would be Fairy Tail. Consistently has various fan service shots both in the manga and the anime. It's more the camera angles for gratuitous shots of cleavage, underwear, or oh, the clothing poofed away because plot and stuff like that. There are also moments where some of the characters use all of their special attacks or their heavy attacks, whatever term you want to use it, like their KO move. And there were some episodes where every single character just does it one after another after another. Everyone just lets loose. I feel like that is fan service because you rarely get to see that.
I would call that the unlimited breaker as opposed to the limit breaker.
Yes. And stuff like in video games where, like Doom with the BFG, all the iterations of Doom nowadays have the BFG in some way, shape, or form.
I would even
as
go
fan service.
I would even go and add the chainsaw is a pretty big fan service item in the Doom series. Maybe even more than the BFG nowadays.
Definitely more so in Doom 4 or whatever they're coming out with in the near future.
With those animated full evisceration scenes, yes.
That is fan service.
Yes.
For that series. And most of the manga that I read has various fan service shots. I don't really watch much anime anymore. I've kind of started tuning that out just because of time. And even some of the TV shows I used to watch, the one that came to mind was what was it called? Now I'm going to blank on it because I didn't write it down, because I'm silly like that. Andromeda, otherwise known as Hercules in Space, because it had Kevin Sorbo in it, and they made occasional nods to the fact that he was like a Greek god.
Ah, that would fall under fan service in my definition. Now, anime from like the 80s and the 90s, did they have nearly as much fan service as we see now? Has sort of the artistic integrity fallen to the wayside in search of capitalism and more money and profits?
I have 5 words for you. Fist of the North Star.
I already want to watch it based on that name.
I've only seen the first episode, and I agree wholeheartedly with Calvin.
Yeah, Fist of the North Star is like is like the Michael Bay film of anime. Like not in terms of explosions, but in terms of like ridiculous. Like I'm not terribly well versed with like directors that are like all about blood and gore, but like in terms of just like sheer ridiculousness and outlandishness in the way that the villains and various characters in this movie died, just absolutely out of control. And like if you're into just ridiculously campy violence and a surprisingly good plot, Fist of the North Star is the way to go. Like Fist of the North Star is like in terms of like their broader terms of fan service, Fist of the North Star fits into that definition most definitely. Does anybody else agree with that? Those who have seen Fist of the North Star.
I do, for all one episode that I've seen so far.
I know that Will, who only seems to be running at about 1 frame every 4 seconds, when you mentioned Fist of the North Star, I saw frame by frame of him belly laughing. So
yes.
Even if his mic is not fully engaged and cannot work, he definitely agrees. I was thinking of, have you seen Peter Jackson's Brain Dead?
I have not.
It is a ridiculously violent, like, I wouldn't say true parody, but there's like a scene where a guy has to attack all these zombie monsters, and he uses a push lawnmower, and he holds the lawnmower up, like vertical, and then grinds people. It's pretty hilarious.
I also know it by the name Dead Alive. It
Oh,
has a
Dead
couple
Alive.
names.
Yeah, that's right. I think Dead Alive is the
Ah,
actual release.
okay. Okay, that one I'm familiar with.
Yes, that one was ridiculous. There's a scene where an entire person gets put into a blender. It's just, and the blood is so fake, but that kind of is what gives it its charm and what makes it, it allows it to get away with a lot more than what a normal horror movie would get away with, because it's so dumb, and it looks like they just took a bunch of Taco Bell meat paste and used that as the gore material.
Mm. Oh my. Will mentioned in the chat Neon Genesis Evangelion. Now I haven't seen too many episodes of that one, but I'm sure a couple of us have seen it. And there any one of us that can attest to excuse me, the amount of fan service in that one?
Nope.
Unfortunately, I cannot, but
Oh.
I definitely believe it.
It's still on my to be watched list, but haven't gotten to it yet.
Same here.
And the whole, Gundam fighting giant robots with swords, it sort of doesn't make sense from a logistical standpoint why you would design a robot with a giant light sword instead of just massive guns and leave it at that. But swords is very fan servicey, I would say, and it's awesome, and that's okay.
Speaking of those, makes me think of Megas XLR, which was nothing but fan service in regards to giant robots.
And gratuitous amounts of Bruce Campbell.
Yes.
And speaking of Bruce Campbell, I'm surprised this hasn't come up at this point in the conversation. The Evil Dead series.
Yes, that it was coming. I was going to bring it up.
I was going to bring up his movie, My Name is Bruce.
Yes.
Which is just fan service to everything he's ever done.
And the new show that's coming out, I think, on Stars, which is Ash vs. Evil Dead, that's just literally 100% fan service as well.
To that entire franchise. And
yes.
I sincerely hope I have Stars so that I can watch that.
And even the remake, they did the fan service from, there's people in certain camps, and I'm probably one of them, that likes the first one better because it's a true horror film and not a campy, ridiculous mess. And the remake was fan service for those people like me, and I love the remake. They really upped the notch on, like we were talking about Squicks before. There's a lot of them in this movie. Not necessarily. I mean, there's lots of horrible violence, but there's a lot of a guy being attacked with a knife, and the knife is going down into his face, but his glasses are stopping it. Or no, it's a needle, I think, if I remember correctly. It's a needle of some sort, and it's just tap, 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 trying to break through the glasses. And that, I'm not a fan of eye damage in movies. I can't really take it. I won't put in contacts, because I feel like I've spent most of my life avoiding putting foreign objects into my eyes, and I'm not planning on stopping anytime soon. It served me well thus far. So yeah, ridiculous deaths, especially in the Friday the 13th franchise, especially Jason X, which was just pure fan service, because the deaths were stupid, but also hilarious. Like a person gets their face dipped in liquid nitrogen and frozen, and then he takes that head and beats it on a workbench over and over again. That's fan service. I would put that on that list.
I would also say they're equivalent to the holodeck that they trap them in temporarily, and then
Yes.
they set it up as just a campground with two
Oh, and
girls.
doesn't he like have a sleeping bag with two girls in it? They swinging around like a weapon.
Either he puts both of them in the sleeping bag, or one and then beats one with the other
Beats
in the
the other
sleeping
one with the
bag.
person in the sleeping bag. Yes, that is hilarious. And it's sort of like the tongue in cheek, not taken seriously type of stuff that I really like. Um, I would consider the entire Saw franchise to probably be just scene after scene of fan service. Like, oh, what sort of ridiculous, violent, agonizing trap can we come up with? Let's throw in as much as, it's a torture porn, as we mentioned last week. Uh, and I feel like I can take a lot of that if it is included correctly and surrounds like a cohesive plot and is not actually just a vehicle for the fan service. I
That
understand that to market media, you need to draw in your audience, so you need to have ridiculous stuff because A, it goes good in the trailer and brings people in. But I would like a little bit of artistic integrity in my media generally.
I feel like that series consistently migrated away from all of those contraptions, helped push the plot to here's a crazy contraption and what it does.
And in fact, some of the movies you couldn't actually escape from the traps. And they sort of wish-washed that away by saying, oh, it's another person making the traps.
Yeah, that one frustrated me. I think that's where I just finally tapped out.
I'm surprised you made it past the first one, to be honest. I didn't think you were that kind of person.
The first one I found clever because of the plot twist.
Yes, the first one I think still holds up as a legitimately good movie.
The second one tried to continue that plot and try to wrap some of it up, which, fine, fair enough. And then the third one, they just kept on going.
But what if the third one happened before the second one and the fourth one ran concurrently with the first one?
Weren't they
There
up
was
to
some,
6 at one point?
they not all of them have numbers. The Saw Final Saw was one of them, and that didn't have a number. And then there was the Final Destination. I feel like the Final Destination franchise is another sort of violent fan service.
Hmm.
Calvin, did you have any other examples before I go through my examples?
Since you were talking about like horror movies that overstayed their welcome, Hellraiser came to mind.
I was
Oh,
told to stop after the second one, and I listened.
good.
It's probably good that you did.
I heard like Hellraiser 5 is actually pretty good, but I don't want to have to go. I'm a completionist, so I wouldn't be able to watch that without watching 3, 4, and 5, which I heard are awful. And a lot of them are made only so that the movie studio could keep the rights to the franchise.
That would not
Mm.
surprise me.
That like Hellraiser devolved to the point where it was like all the newer movies were relegated to the Sci-Fi Channel.
Hmm.
I remember me and CJ watching Hellraiser 7 Deader on the Sci-Fi Channel one time in college.
I think I blocked that
At
out.
that point, it was just like all fan service, or I'm not even sure if you could consider
Right, there can be things that
fan
are just
service
bad. They don't have to be
at that
fancy.
point.
They do it for the sake of they can, not because they
Mm,
should.
mm.
Like all Yui Bowl movies.
Let's not talk about UV Bowl.
The new Jurassic Park movie, definitely the last scene in that was definitely fan service.
Yes.
Because people were pissed at number 3. Pissed. And so Jurassic World was like, hey, we know you guys are pissed. So wouldn't it be awesome if we did this instead? And I don't want to spoil it because it's still pretty new, but it's definitely worth the watch.
Okay.
I do appreciate how they made that movie and what they added in. I'm intrigued as to how they'll continue it. We'll see.
I have something that I'd like to get your opinion, or I get you guys' opinion about as to whether or not this is fan service. The upcoming Ghostbusters reboot, given what they've decided, certain aspects they've decided to do, I like to call Rule 63 Ghostbusters. They decided to bring on Chris Hemsworth as essentially Rule 63 Janine.
To answer your question, everything about that movie, everyone from the original movie making a cameo is fan service. Thor being in the movie is definitely fan service. I agree on all those counts. Because you know there's going to be some sexual tension at some point, and it's going to be played for laughs. And
Nah.
I'm fine with it. I don't know if it's my thing, but it's going to happen.
I'm definitely interested to see how this movie comes out. Fan service and all. That was one example that came to mind.
Oh, a good example of an actual product that is pure fan service that is releasing this month. Pepsi Perfect.
What?
What?
Why? What is it? What is it?
Pepsi Perfect is a limited release version of the Pepsi from Back to the Future that featured in whichever one was in 2015 in the future.
Yay, marketing. Yep, that I would add that on the fan service list.
It does look like a very nice bottle, but I can live without it.
Before I get into my big discussion point, which is the ghost character in Metal Gear Solid 5, which I think I'm the only one who can talk about. Did you guys watch the videos that I posted in the show notes?
I didn't get a chance.
In the quiet of your own home?
There are ghosts. It's a paranormal game now.
No. So I'll get to that in a second. But my other examples would be Bayonetta is a game that I would consider to be somewhat fan servicey in that there's a lot of gratuitous action and also long camera tracking under the crotch shots, which seem a little much. But the general consensus, and I haven't played the Bayonetta games, the general consensus of Bayonetta is that it's more of an empowering situation and empowering through sexualization occasionally, but it's not as much objectifying. And we'll get into objectifying when we talk about Metal Gear Solid 5. One of my other examples was the Xena Warrior Princess fandom. Really liked the idea of Gabriel and Xena forming a lesbian relationship to the point where the writers started putting in small references to them. And unfortunately, the main story involves Xena, and I think it's Ares is her main boy in the show. So that would make Xena almost bisexual in this sort of encounter. But the lesbian relationship was always like subtly implied in sort of a fan servicey type of way, including I guess there's a scene, and I didn't get a chance to watch the scene itself, but where I couldn't find it. There's a scene where there's like a mouth-to-mouth like water transfer. I don't know what the context of it was, but it was specifically designed to look like they were kissing to sort of appease some of the fandom. And it sort of sparked a war on, should there be, a lesbian couple in media? And this was in the 90s, so this was, just at the start of talking about homosexuality and transsexuality. So it sort of jumped the shark in that respect, or was ahead of its time, I should say. Jumped the shark, not so much. Although it did do that in a few other contexts.
Like the last 3 seasons.
The last season I heard, and I don't think this is spoiling because it's so old, but what I was reading, and I don't know if this was a spin-off or if it was actually the last season, but they go into the future in modern day times where they're making a Xena warrior princess
Those are
show or
fan
Broadway
service
play.
episodes specifically.
They're
There are
what?
only a couple. There's like 2 or 3 episodes where they're in modern times, and they're doing that. I forget if it was fully the last season or the last couple seasons, but they jumped the shark in that Roman mythology kind of took over, and they actually got crucified, went to quote unquote heaven and hell, swapped around a couple times because one of their main enemies was demonic, and then they did the salvation thing on it and shenanigans, and then they come back because why not?
Oh my god.
And for that series, it was basically implied they were bisexual each, considering they both had romantic couples at points, and I forget if no, they both did. They both had children, and their children were significant plot points at the time, and all sorts of other shenanigans, and it got really weird. Especially in the last season where they just start killing off Greek gods outright. Because Xena's child can do that.
So it ended up being like a prequel to God of War.
More or less. By the end of that series, because I think Hercules finished before that, most of the Greek pantheon was dead. Because of Xena's child.
Well.
And I would also add that Hercules also had its various fan service segments between Hercules and Aeolus.
Yes. Also, I was thinking that, and this will kind of spin into the last general topic of discussion. I watched the A-Team with one of my coworkers, and there's a lot of fan service, and I don't know if it's considered fan service or if it's just, what's to be expected from the series. There's a gratuitous scene where they are building the equipment that they need to use to get out of the jam. There's lots of close-up shots of welding and, fastening iron together and reworking engine parts. And it doesn't really serve the plot so much as it's a functional montage. And then there's always a car flipping over, and it usually explodes when it flips over. No one. Guns go off constantly, and not a single person ever gets shot. And they always escape in a helicopter. This is like every single scene, or like every single episode, they have to tick off these 5 checkboxes. And I don't know if I would consider that fan service. I mean, it's sort of. I would probably put it under the umbrella, maybe not in extreme fan service, but they're definitely ticking off those checkboxes because that's what the audience is expecting. So they're sort of limiting their storytelling ability by kind of following what the fans like. So yeah, I guess I would put that under the category.
Seems more like accidental fan service.
Well, when it becomes,
Formulaic.
12 seasons and it's formulaic and it does it every single episode, then maybe it's not so accidental.
The last one that comes to mind for me is an in-universe crossover of Stargate and Stargate Atlantis, where the 2 main mercenary characters of Teal'c from Stargate SG-1 and then Ronan from Stargate Atlantis actually meet, and they actually have like a 5-minute fight scene where they just battle it out. And it's inconclusive as to which one wins.
That's the most fan servicey part at the end there.
That was a fantastic episode, and I appreciated the fan service.
So that brings me to the last topic. Is fan service bad or inappropriate? and I'm going to finish off after you guys talk and we all talk openly with the Metal Gear Solid 5 reference, which sort of gets me wishy-washy on the whole thing. But for me, in general, I consume fan service, and it doesn't necessarily dictate what media I consume or watch, but I definitely appreciate it. I definitely like the silly nods to other franchises. Uh, I find a lot of the gratuitous sexual fan service to be a little much sometimes, although uh, I'm an adult and don't necessarily mind it and don't get up in arms about it. The entire reason why we are doing this topic is because I bought original artwork that sort of inspired this topic. I'm not going to show it on video because we're trying to keep this somewhat more safe for work than what we could. But it's basically Supergirl jumping off of a building and heading towards the ground. But the camera is above her, and she's in her skirt, and her legs are open a little bit, and she's wearing Superman underwear. And that is definitely fan servicey, but it's so over the top and so obvious what the artist is doing that I appreciated it, and I bought the art and had him sign it because I thought it was funny. I didn't consider it, oh, we're sexualizing Supergirl and we shouldn't be doing that, because it wasn't necessarily sexual. Uh, it was definitely a fan servicey panty shot, but it was sort of almost like tongue-in-cheek parodizing the whole idea of a fan service thing, and it was so obvious and in your face that I appreciated that. And I can understand people who wouldn't like that, and that's fine. But let the artist draw what they want, and let people consume the media that they want. And that's sort of my take on it. I like action movies because of the explosions. I like hyper-violence in my movies, and I like really grotesque stuff in horror. The I prefer dark horror more than like torture porn, violence horror. You can have buckets of blood, but it doesn't necessarily interest me. But if you have something that's really grotesque and sort of upsetting, I kind of like that. Uh, and again, I'm an adult and I consume various media, and if that's going to make the studio more money, then all the power to them, and I don't necessarily have a problem with it.
There are times where fan service can get out of hand, but in general, I can't really say that fan service is a bad thing. Like, if fan
And
service,
oh, go ahead.
okay. if uh, if pandering to your fans and pandering to specific types of specific groups of people is wrong, then the movie industry would be like eternally screwed. So as long as long as people enjoy being pandered to, fan service will never be a bad thing. At least not in my opinion.
Yeah. We'll probably get some flack being an all-male cast for this podcast and not getting a woman's opinion. But when I showed this poster off to my wife, she sort of just looked at me, looked at the poster, and sort of just like shook her head and sighed and walked away. But she didn't get upset. She didn't get incensed. She didn't think that I was doing anything too inappropriate. She was just like, really? But it would be the same thing if I, was watching this really gross horror movie and somebody got decapitated, but they're still talking. She would look at me and go, "What are you watching? I don't understand it." And that's the media she gets to consume versus the media I get to consume. And it's, she can watch what she wants and I'll watch what I want. I don't watch a lot of the stuff that she watches, and one of my exes was a Grey's Anatomy fan, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. And I would consider some of that fan servicey, some plot points that went on there. And whatever. It's an art. It's an art form, and people are making a buck off it. Sorry. Uh, and I'll get to some of the sexual stuff in a minute. But CJ, what were your general opinions on your consumption of fan service and your level of tolerance for it?
In general, I don't really have any problems with fan service because they are giving the fans what the fans want. But for some film franchises and some video game franchises, sometimes they lose sight of what the fans actually want and just try and create what they think the fans want, and then there's a disconnect. Like the
Yes.
Saw franchise starts derailing from fan service to they liked all these torture porn devices, let's just toss 20 more in the next movie. They start having sort of a cognitive dissonance or whatever an equivalent term would be in this context with the fans. But
Yeah, I would say a disconnect would be appropriate.
yeah. But I have no problem consuming fan service of stuff that I appreciate. I tend to avoid fan service from stuff I don't care for. It's easy enough to ignore or just not find, especially on social media now. And I had another point, but I didn't write it down, so I forgot it.
Great.
So,
Well, if you come up to it, feel free to interrupt me.
yep.
Because I might do a little monologuing again one more time before we move on. And that is of the last topic, Metal Gear Solid 5. There's a character there named Quiet. And I'm not going to tell you why, but there's a story reason that she wears almost no clothes through the entire thing. And if you watch the videos in the link, which are extremely not safe for work, and I do not recommend watching them while you're at work, you will see some of the things that go on in this video game involving this character. I will describe briefly a few things, and I can't tell if CJ's watching them now and he's already disturbed, or if he's looking at something else. But so now the question is fan service bad when it can be taken to be objectifying women? And I'm not going to make that judgment call, especially not on this podcast, because everyone has their own limits of what they feel is appropriate. You know, there's conservatives and liberals. They're all going to have their different opinions. But I'm going to bring up a couple points with this character. And I'm going to describe a couple scenes and talk about my thoughts on them and how much they're considered fan service versus how appropriate they are, in my opinion. And this is not the opinion of the rest of the crew either. But scene one that I'll talk about is there's a scene where Ghost is in a helicopter, I think, and she's basically doing her like stretching routine. And the main character in the game is standing behind her, and the camera is also behind her. And one of the stretches she does is basically go into the yoga downward dog position, and there's an extremely tight shot of her bending over with extremely, revealing underwear, essentially battle underwear, you might say. And that shot and that camera shot is purely for fan service, and it's 100% objectifying Ghost in this scene. The second of the three scenes I want to talk about real quick is there's a scene where she's more clothed than usual, I would say, but then there's like a big rainstorm, and she loves the rain. And I haven't played the full game. I've only seen the cutscenes, and they're somewhat out of context. But she takes off all of her clothes almost, and then starts like dancing and playing in the rain. And I watched the whole cutscene because I didn't get immediately offended and just watched the whole thing. And she sort of ends up getting playful with the rain and starts getting playful with the other main character. And it was actually kind of a cute and touching scene. She just happened to not be wearing a whole lot, and it was raining, so obviously everything was glistening and shining. But that sort of brought a human element to the character that I thought was touching. And I didn't really mind that she wasn't wearing that much clothing in that scene. she likes the rain, and if she wants to take off all her clothes and play in the rain, that's her prerogative. No one's forcing her to do that. You could argue that the programmer is forcing her to do that, but that's sort of another weird meta discussion that we can have another day. But as a character in the game, this seems like a perfectly fine scene. The third one, where things get a little more interesting, which I have a different take on than a lot of people, is there's a scene where she's taking a shower in a public shower. And she's still wearing the typical clothes that she wears, but she's taking a shower, and you hear all the guys in the base that she's at, like, just staring at her and going, "Oh man, we're so lucky we get to see this," and "Oh man, we're just, can you believe what this is?" and "Oh, I'm gonna have fun with this tonight," and really gross comments all around. And so you would think my initial reaction would be, oh, well, this is definitely an appropriate level of fan service, and it's definitely objectifying this character. And what I find interesting is that it is objectifying the character, but not from the audience point of view and not from the writer's point of view. The people in the background are objectifying this woman. And I think that's a perfectly realistic scene that sort of addresses the fan service in an interesting way, where it's sort of a commentary on it. You've got all these characters in the background making lewd comments at this girl, and yeah, it's disgusting, and they shouldn't be doing that, but that's what those characters are doing. And if you look at it in that sort of sense, you can kind of appreciate, oh, she's doing this despite all of these people, ogling her. She's sort of doing her own thing, and she doesn't really care. And you should be more disgusted at the guys sneering and snickering in the background than you should be at her or the writers. So I kind of actually like that scene and think that it says more about the franchise as a whole and sort of fan service as a whole than a lot of other people that I've been reading have thought. If you want the opposite of opinion of me, I have also, I believe, linked the Rock, Paper, Shotgun article where they talk about the character Quiet, and the article's called Disquiet. It's the first Metal Gear Solid 5 link. It's a very long article, and it's very spoilery. They say at one point, oh, we're going to talk about spoilers near the end of this article, but don't worry, we'll tell you when it comes up. And then they immediately go into it without the secondary warning. So be very careful when reading that article. It talks about a lot of stuff. And it sort of plays more on the objectifying and sexualizing versus empowering and sexualizing. And I think there's still debate to be had, and I think it's going to depend highly on the person consuming the media. And I don't think it's something that we can make a judgment call as like a group of people which torch to raise. I don't know if anyone else has other alternate opinions about the whole idea of some fan service being considered objectifying to women, but in my humble opinion, it's going to be up to the consumer to make that judgment call. And if they find it inappropriate, then don't consume that media. And that's really all I can recommend, because I'm of the opinion that freedom of speech and expression is more important than how you feel. And if it's not literally and physically hurting anybody, then I consider it a little more, I'm more on board with it than other people might be.
I agree enough. And I remembered the other thing that I wanted to bring up. Does Stephanie Meyer's new novel count as fan service?
I knew that question was going to come up, and I already have my answer. I would say no, for two reasons. One, I don't think any fans were requesting this service to be rendered, so that sort of takes it away. Also, it's not being sold as far as I know. It's just sort of, you could say it's sort of like a media stunt more than a fan service thing. And, if you want to write it from the perspective of all of the characters being gender reversed, I don't think that's fan servicey. I think the content within that work could be fan servicey, but the idea behind it, I don't think necessarily instills fan service in my mind. I would have to read the actual text to make the call.
Well, the fan fiction equivalent of, or fan fiction piece that she basically put together is being bundled with the 10th anniversary edition of Twilight,
Oh, that's interesting.
which is being released yesterday.
Wait, what anniversary did you say?
It's apparently the 10th anniversary since
No,
Twilight was released,
no,
according to articles.
no, that doesn't make any sense. Just came out a couple years ago, I think.
They say 10th anniversary of Twilight.
No, 2005 could easily be. Now, remember, there was some lead time before those books became movies. I was seeing those stupid apples and chess pieces on the cover all over the place way before the movies came out.
Yeah, this is being added to the 10th anniversary of the book release,
Right.
not the movie.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, 10th anniversary of the book, I believe.
And I think it's the 10th anniversary of the first book, and it's just the gender swap AU of the first book so far. But it is 400 pages, apparently.
For those who don't know, AU probably stands for Augmented Universe.
Augmented or alternate. I forget which.
Well, if it's... Oh, AU would be alternative. I was thinking UU, Augmented Universe.
But augmented starts with an A.
Crap, you're right. So it could be either. We were both right.
Which is why I wasn't quite sure.
I think Will just face palmed. That was the only frame that I was able to see on his camera. Is him face palming.
It does kind of raise the question of, does fan fiction fall under fan service?
I don't know. I think a lot of people write fan fiction for themselves and then hope that other people enjoy it. I don't know if they're doing it. When I think of fan service, I think of it as specifically designed to bring more viewers into the media to get more money. And I think you could open up that umbrella to non-profit driven fan service and sort of like a narcissism level of fan service where you just want more people to enjoy your writing or get more of an audience. So I don't know. I think that's a gray area. It could be considered fan service, I guess.
So with that said, since Stephanie Meyer made this gender swap Twilight, would that be fan service? The author basically made a fanfic of her own novel.
I think it's interesting. I don't know if I would even consider it. I mean, I guess it's a fanfic, but when I think of fanfic, I think a direct correlation with fan service. Like if Rawlings wrote, another book where it was basically, let's just say Hermione was involved in great detail. That would be fan servicey and specifically designed to get male readers to read it. But talking more about the characters or kind of playing with the universe, Marvel has done the whole Infinite Universe thing before where everything's different and playing with the ideas and taking new roles on it. I don't consider that necessarily fan service right off the bat. Now, if I read that text and saw that the gender bending or the gender reversal resulted in some, weird steamy stuff that people were requesting in their own fan service, then maybe I would add that to the list.
Okay.
But I don't know if I'd throw it in the fan service pile without reading it.
Okay. Fair enough.
I leave the reading of this book up to Justin.
Nope. I've got a long list of books to read before I get to that. Well, since we spent an hour on this topic, I'm going to say if anyone listening has any comments or anything to add, or is incensed with our topic and has another point of view that isn't male dominant, feel free to send comments our way. We'd be happy to read them and make and provide responses, even on air. But for now, in the interest of time, we're going to move forward, and I'm going to sort of give the reins over to CJ again. Since he's the one that put the notes together for this part.
Only kind of, sort of, hand it over.
Yeah, just kind of sort of hand it over.
All right. Well, it's time for the weekly highlights reel segment. So let's see what we have to talk about this week. First piece is a fun little infographic because it's October, Monsters in Literature, where they rank various monsters from classic literature on how scary are they. And you start with the giant squid from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is only, 20% scary. And they cover goblins, the headless horseman, murlocs from the time machine. A fair amount of monsters and horrifying creatures throughout literature. And they go all the way up to none other than Pennywise from Stephen King's It, which ranks at a full 100. And considering the rendition from the movie, I am in full agreement in regards to that score.
The book is even more upsetting than the movie.
I know. I've read it. It's one of the few Stephen King books I've actually finished.
If there's a list of 5 Stephen King books that I had to recommend everyone read, it would be one of those 5. Unless you don't like clowns, and then don't read it. I don't know if I consider the ring wraiths that scary.
Depends on which rendition. If you're talking the Rankin Bass versions, those were pretty darn creepy.
I guess I haven't read all of the books or to their entirety, so I'm only familiar with the movie renditions.
Yeah, to be fair, they weren't that scary visually in the books. It was probably more scary in that there was no real way to kill them or defeat them. You could only kind of delay them.
Right. I would almost put the Dementors ahead of the Nazgul in that I found the idea of the Dementors like basically sucking out all of your happiness and soul a little more upsetting.
And they could fly on their own.
Yes. And they weren't bound to a physical object. Or were they? I don't remember.
No, I don't remember either. It's been a little while. But it's just a fun little infographic that is appropriate for the season. And it is amusing, some of the ones that they toss in here. Like Tosh from The Horse and His Boy. I don't remember that one at all. But it's been forever since I've read that septology. So go take a peek if you want to see some of the weird monsters in literature and how they rank. Up next, hey, more ebooks, because book bundles have rotated through. Over on Story Bundle, their latest bundle is video games, specifically their 7th video game bundle. And as per usual for them, the first tier is $1 and up. You get, in this case, 4. If you happen to pay the second tier price of, I'm going to guess, $12. $12 and up, you get the second tier. which are the bonus ones here. If you're to do just the $1 or up tier, you would get Boss Fight Books, Baldur's Gate 2 by Matt Bell, Shooter by Patrick Lindsay and Reed McCarter, Video War by Stephen Maines, and Stay a While and Listen by David L. Craddock. If you were to do $12 and up to get the second tier, you would also get Game Boy World 1989 by Jeremy Parrish, HG 101 presents The Unofficial Guide to Konami Shooters by Kurt Kalata, Boss Fight Books Metal Gear Solid by Ashley and Anthony Birch, and Mona by Leigh Alexander and Emily Carroll, which also gives you the audiobook version of that book. And this bundle just went up recently, so as of this recording, you have 22 days and change to go check it out. And within the last few hours, Humble Bundle just released their latest book bundle. And I heard Justin click on his audio. Did you want to take this one?
No, I just knew I was going to make comments on how awesome this is.
Okay.
But I will introduce it as the... I would prefer them not to be, but they're audiobooks. But they are of all of the classic Goosebumps franchises, including such as, let's see, The Haunted Mask. There's a lot of stuff here that I recognize. Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, Night of the Living Dummy, The Ghost Next Door, lots of the classics in audiobook form now, which I found very exciting. And we were discussing the price point, but we'll get to that after CJ rattles off the names.
All right. Similar to Story Bundle, they have 3 tiers. You have the $1 and up tier, which gives you 4 audiobooks. You have the average tier, which gives you, in this case, 5 more books, plus whichever ones they toss in as they go. And the average is currently at $8.61, but that gyrates depending on how much people donate. And then there's the top tier, which is currently $15 or more, which gives you 3 more audiobooks. If you did just the regular tier of $1 and up, you would get The Haunted Mask, One Day at Horrorland, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, and The Werewolf of Fever Swamp, all in audiobooks. If you went to the average price tier of $8.61 currently, you would also get The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, Return of the Mummy, Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, Vampire Breath, and Stay Out of the Basement, which was my favorite Goosebumps book.
Is that the one with the green slime?
I think so. One? There were a couple.
Or is that the thing under the sink?
I think that's the one under the sink. It's been forever since I've read these. And if you were to do the $15 and up tier, you would get Night of the Living Dummy, Night of the Living Dummy 2, and The Ghost Next Door. And this just released tonight, so you have a full 13 days and change to go check this one out. And I know Justin had commentary as to the price point of this audiobook bundle.
So they say that this is $240 almost worth of audiobooks. And I was trying to think of how expensive are audiobooks. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 books here. And if they were like $5 a piece, that would be $60. If they were $10 a piece, that'd be $120. So that means these are like $20 a piece almost? That seems kind of absurd for very short books. I mean, when I was reading these, even as a kid, I was banging these out, once a day. These are not long reads. And yes, it takes a lot of work to record an audiobook. I'm not going to deny that fact. But if these were retail $20 each, oh, there'd be no way I would buy these. I would much rather pay like a bunch of money for the collection of the books themselves.
Yeah, and for comparison, our audiobook is like $10, and that's bundled with the ebook. So to think of these at a price point of $20 each, that's pretty expensive just for one audiobook
Which I
of the
guess
original movie.
even makes this better. This bundle.
Yeah, so for $15, you would get 12 ebook audiobooks plus whatever else they add within the next 13 days, because they always add 1 to 3 more as they go.
Is
They,
anyone else afraid that the movie that's coming out is going to be a fan servicey mess?
I'm sure it's going to be filled with fan service. I am hoping that it is not going to be a mess.
It's starring Jack Black as R.L. Stein. Does that change your opinion?
To a degree, but I actually like some Jack Black movies.
But as R.L. Stein,
We'll see.
we will. I'm sure I'll provide colorful commentary when it comes out on the podcast.
You should do a movie review.
That might get dangerous.
Can we use company funds to pay for me getting the movie and watching it?
Yeah, yours.
I mean, it's not really how that works, but
And just to wrap up the segment, those are all the highlights we have for this week. The links are all in the show notes for episode 112 if you want to go check them out. Which leads us into the Productivity and Inspiration Station segment, where we get to discuss personal highlights and stuff that's gone on over the past week. Starting with myself, I achieved 1/3 of my financial milestones that I've set for the next 6 months, which I didn't expect to actually hit as soon as I did, which I am very happy about, but now I have 2/3 of the milestones to go, and one of them is now confirmed to be a lot higher than expected, but I already know the order of how they're going to go. So it's probably going to be more of a year-long process rather than a 6-month process. We'll see. I've also recorded, edited, and queued up all of my October Game Break episodes for the month. And I finally hit the twist in one of the visual novels, and it made me angry. It is not the move I would have made in this story, and I'm not sure if that's for better or worse. But in a visual novel where there are 7 days to the plot, I have finished 6, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to wrap this up in a manner that is not going to make me upset. And there's nothing I can physically throw at the wall since it's just a digital video game, so we'll see. And I've been good. I finished a book. I finished reading Cinder by Marissa Mayer, and I'm halfway through the sequel, Scarlet.
ooh, you can now buy another book.
Those were ebooks on my Kindle.
Still, I allow it.
I'll bank that, seeing as I'm going to be taking physical books on vacation with me, so I don't need to currently buy any,
What?
and my budget will not allow that anyway.
What if Cape Cod has a used bookstore?
Oh, I know exactly where all those bookstores are, and I will be going to them. But there's no guarantees that I'll necessarily buy anything. We'll see. And I double-checked to make sure they still exist, because it's been over a decade since I've been there. And the only other thing is today I figured out what my potential nano concept is going to be for this year. I'm still working on outlining the logistics of it. But I finally have an idea, and it's something that I think would be worthwhile, and I'm excited to work on. So, yay.
Rolling into my productivity inspiration, I too decide on my nano plot. It's inspired by a Fast and Furious marathon I had over the weekend, and I decided to write a ridiculous, action-packed novel that I'm going to literally pants the entire way through, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. I'm going to use this sort of as a, hey, maybe you should write every day sort of thing, instead of like really trying to get like an actual legitimate novel that I want to try to publish down, which is what I've been doing in the past. This is going to be strictly pantsing all the way through, and it's going to be hilarious. And I'm going to be posting it on the website as I write it. So keep an eye out on that. But I'm doing stuff where I'm taking like the actors' names from famous movies and their character names and kind of blending them together. And making new characters based on those names, doing ridiculous stuff. And speaking of fan service, there's going to be so much fan service in this thing. So much. And I even figured out how I'm going to do a time travel thing for Calvin's request, that I write something about time travel. I've already got that point. I don't have the plot, but I have like the point of the plot. And it's going to be stupid. And it's going to be awesome. I set up my laptop with a clean install for productivity purposes, and I installed all the things that I need in the right order and got that up and running, so that's actually pretty good. Even just today, I did one of the classes with my new setup, and that worked out really well, and everything worked fine. I did a test run on the Game Break series, and I got so close to doing it successfully. I got the movie edited, I've got the camera window, I've got voiceover stuff. The one thing I didn't do, which I learned from Calvin and should have done in advance, knowing that he does this, is setting up a sync point. It is so hard to sync audio and video, especially from multiple audio sources and multiple video sources, together succinctly without a cue point. That was stupid, and I gave up. All I ended up doing was like rendering a short video that was way out of sync just to make sure it was the right resolution and everything. And so that all worked out fine. If I add a sync point in when I start, I think I'll be okay in the future. But man, Calvin, you should have tapped me on the shoulder over the weekend and said, hey, Justin, maybe you should do this.
To be fair, I had no idea you were doing this.
No, I'm definitely not blaming you. But it would have been nice if you were standing over my shoulder telling me to do that. Because I believe you know all too well the importance of having a sync point. And I'm sure Will, the master of editing, also understands that importance of a sync point. I'm sure he'd be nodding yes if his camera was updating. Was there anything else? And yesterday, I tried for the first time a smoked beer, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. So that sort of inspired me to try to make my own at some point when I have a little bit more time. Probably next year. Although I may not brew beer next year either if I'm trying to do my financial goals. We'll see. That'll be for another productivity segment.
I vote someone else samples it.
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea.
I've already done the mystery meat of doom.
But I didn't make that one.
Details. I'm going to cut in and roll us back to Will's productivity in the hopes that he can actually join in, but he is waving no.
I would at least like to try.
Oh,
so far
he is
so
waving
good.
Yes.
Would be helpful to get the chance to speak to see if the microphone is working.
You are actually
So far, yes.
currently clear.
Yeah. All right. So I admit I didn't seem to get much done this past week, as much as I thought I did, unless I'm just forgetting stuff. But I have been working on for my next big story to come after Roommate, which is exciting and probably bad timing. I should probably finish Roommate first, but the ideas are in my head,
Yay.
so I'm getting them out. And I'm still a week ahead on Game Break, trying to get even faster at making those Game Break episodes, so I can get
Yay.
more ahead. And other than that, that was all I could think of.
Hopefully, starting this weekend, we'll get an even bigger buffer. Especially since probably a lot of mine that I'm going to be doing in the next couple weekends are horror themed, so we may want to bump those earlier in the queue. But we can talk about that when the time comes, assuming I ever record them in the first place.
'Tis the season,
Yep.
and that's pretty much it for me,
While we
as far
have
as I can
you,
remember.
while we have you loud and clear, are there any last minute fan service points you wanted to bring up that weren't discussed?
Well, you brought up Bayonetta, and I don't know if anyone else has played it, but I've played the first Bayonetta, so I can say that it is very fan servicey, but it's kind of self-acknowledging fan servicing, like over the top on purpose, and it kind of fit in with Bayonetta's actual character personality. She's a big T. She's very flirty. She's very sensual. She does it on purpose. She owns up to it. So when the game gets really, it's her doing it because that's her character, and not just, oh hey look, we're doing these really dramatic crotch shots and all this stuff just to bring it in just for the sake of it. Like, I thought about other big female video game characters, and it would be really weird to see Lara Croft doing that because she has a different personality. So I feel like there's room for fan service if it's done correctly, but sometimes it's definitely done incorrectly, and then you just kind of groan.
And I think we have the right as consumers of media to groan. Maybe
Yes.
not light torches and pitchforks and
Yes.
go dox people's accounts, but we definitely have the right to groan and write blog posts about how we don't appreciate that media.
Yeah. Decide maybe not to watch any more of that show if it's getting the wrong time. Fantasy for you. Be a little overly dramatic.
I agree with the parts that you said that I was able to hear, which was most of it this time.
But that's it for me.
And onwards to Calvin.
All right, so let's see. In terms of productivity, I am more or less done with my driving courses. I've gotten just about everything down that I needed to learn. And now I have to sit and wait another 7 Fridays to take the road test.
That just seems absurd.
It is. It is very absurd. I don't understand how November 20th is the earliest I can take this freaking test. But I don't know. I don't know. I will have to figure out ways to bide my time until then. Though I may start, though I may
I
bother.
remember it being that way in New York, and late month.
It's the battle of the cutting out robots. But I believe
Think-
Will said something to the effect of he believes that that was the case in New York, and that doesn't sound surprising to him.
Unfortunately, it shouldn't be all that surprising to me either. Oh well. Let's see. In other news, I've I have been meeting people who need projects and things worked on, which means more money for me. So hooray, because money. And I did a little Inspire the Muse-based design tinkering um, over the past weekend. Nothing too crazy, but something I will share with the group probably after the show. But honestly, that's about it. There, can't really say I was terribly productive this week. Productive creatively. I was productive in other ways. But those other ways don't count as creative endeavors. So I'm gonna leave those alone.
Well, it's not called the Productivity and Creativity Station, so I'll allow it.
Okay. Eh, I did get inspired by a concert I went to this past Thursday. Really, really awesome jazz and soul trio that I came across on Spotify a couple of weeks ago and found out they were having a concert in Manhattan, and I got a chance to see them and meet them and geek out about them. So it was cool. Plus, I think that was like the first concert I'd been to for most of the year. So concerts are my friend. Yeah, that's about it.
Cool. All right, that brings us to events. Nano looms ever closer.
Yay! This time instead of boo like last week.
And the website has reset, so now is your chance to go check out all the brand new posts, see who's in your region, who your MLs are, all that fun stuff. And it looks like they've actually reset the tracking stats for regions. It's no longer everyone who's ever associated themselves to your region ever. It's reset to just active accounts that are homed into your region, because our region currently has, I think, 13 novelists, whereas last year we clocked in at several hundred. So it's actually kind of nice that they reset the stats so it's a little more accurate as to active accounts versus just everyone ever. So we'll see how that fares as we get closer to Nano and everyone starts checking in and catching up and whatnot, and we get all the new people. And I need to get on top of posting since I'm the ML, setting up all the events and coordinating stuff. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about that in the productivity section for next week's episode. Or else. And we still have EuroMiniCon and KinetiCon set on the schedule for next year. No other new events to report quite yet. Probably won't be until the end of this year before we start getting dates and logistics figured out for other ones. We shall see. But with that, that's everything we have for this episode. That's all we got. We've run out of things to talk about. So thank you all for joining us for episode 112 of Word Ninjas Live. As always, if we have entertained you in any way, shape, or form over the last hour and a half, go check out all the previous episodes on our YouTube channel or on the iTunes stream. You can watch, listen, post in the comments. You can check out all the other videos that we do over on the YouTube channel, from the Game Break series to convention shenanigans and interviews. Or you can talk to us on social media. We're over on Twitter at FCWordNinja, over on Tumblr, fcwordninja.tumblr.com, and over on Facebook, facebook.com/fullcoveragewriters. And if you want to check out all the shiny baubles that we've put together over the years, go to the Etsy store, etsy.com/shop/fullcoveragewriters, where we have all of our button designs, our bookmark designs, our writer's block ninja cubes, all of our ebooks, and our little booklet on warping time itself. All that good stuff. Definitely worth checking out. If you want to track me down, your best bet is my personal Tumblr, which is fancypantswolf.tumblr.com. And if you want to track me down for Nano, my Nano ID is YGJunkie85, because that was my username back in 2003, and I just can't be bothered to change it at this point. Where can people track down Will, in the hopes that his internet plays nice and we can hear him?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You can usually find me on my Tumblr page at darkhom.tumblr.com. That's spelled DARKHOM. And you can support my writing endeavors at patreon.com/darkhom.
And where can people track down Justin?
You can find me at mechanicaljustin.com as usual. I'll be posting all my Nano updates there. And I actually put up a bunch of one-liners that I collected last month and put that up. So I am making posts. I'm ramping up for more posts. And CJ just left the Hangouts somehow. Or is that just me?
Nope, he's gone.
Wow.
All right.
I didn't even know that was possible if he hosted it. Well, we're about to close anyways. Where can people find Calvin?
You can look for me on Twitter and Instagram. I've been tweeting again recently. Not, excuse me, not terribly often, but I've been doing some tweeting. So at CCWII is where you can find me on both Instagram and Twitter.
All right. I just realized that I can't hit the off-air button.
And neither can I.
That makes things interesting. I think if we just all hang up and leave the call, it will work. Will, you can edit this all out in post, right? Well, thank you all for listening. I'm sure CJ didn't leave incensed. I don't know what happened. Is he on Skype?
Yeah.
He is away, so God knows what happened. Anyways, I'm going to hang up and then recall the group, and hopefully we won't be live anymore. So for those still listening, thanks for sticking through, and we will see you next week for more fun podcast shenanigans.
Well, until next time, go do something creative already.
Yes, that's how he ends the show.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Go be productive. Go be creative. Go enjoy life.
And until next time. Apparently, this is still live. Hopefully, no one else joins. If you're still watching on YouTube, hello. We are experiencing some technical difficulties and trying to shut down the stream without CJ, and it is becoming difficult. And I don't know what to do at this point. So I'm going to hang up again and talk to people on Skype. Oh, wait, maybe Calvin joined. Bueller. Well, this has not worked, so I'm going to hang up and call everyone else on Skype. Until next time, hopefully with less technical difficulties.